Let's do it. Yeah, welcome to a long-awaited review of one of my all-time favorite buddy cop movies and one of my favorite action films of the 1980s, Tango and Cash. This is a Blu-ray that was graciously sent to me by a good friend of mine, Matt, Ramble Rat for Life, which I gotta say thank you. I know you sent this to me a long time ago, but hey, uh, I did the music video for Tango and Cash, and then I decided to watch it again, and I was like, perfect time to review the movie, and also thank my good friend for sending this to me. And I'm really glad to have this on Blu-ray because the DVD copy that I have of this does not look good on my flat screen at all. That's the kind of a problem with some of these older Warner Brothers DVDs, is that the widescreen might have looked fine on an older TV, but when you try to use a Blu-ray player and upconvert it and try to watch it on an HD flat screen, it just does not hold up and it looks really bad. Like the widescreen is like tiny, and then you try to zoom it in, and then it just looks awful. So yeah, definitely got to have this. This is one of my favorite films, and this is a watchable copy. It would be nice to have features, but I don't think that'll ever happen considering how apparently controversial this film's production is, which is something that it was absolute, totally new news to me. It was something that I did not know about until I did some research before I decided to record this review for the film. Anyway, Tango and Cash is a film that I had heard of, but I hadn't really seen until my teenage years. And specifically, the first time I saw it is when I was visiting my grandparents in Arizona. So I was staying with them, and they allowed me to rent movies from this local video store. So I rented a bunch of stuff. I saw a lot of stuff for the first time when I was staying with my grandparents. Uh, all different genres too, not just action. And one of them was Tango and Cash. And I just loved it. I fell in love with this movie from day one. First viewing, I really loved it. I thought it was just a blast. It was really entertaining. It was a lot of fun. It was great to see two of my favorite actors, Kurt Russell and Sylvester Stallone, together in one movie. And I just thought it was just a very awesome film. And then I did some research on it later, found out it kind of underperformed in the box office. Critics weren't too keen on it. And then it has this crazy backstory, which I'm just like, wow, I didn't know anything about this. And so I kind of honestly have come to believe that Tango and Cash is honestly a little bit underrated. Much like another film that Stallone did the same year, which he was also incarcerated in, his character anyway, Lockup. I thought Lockup was underrated as well, and at least Tango and Cash seems to get its fans, does have its fair share of fans nowadays. Like you could say maybe has a cult following, but Lockup is definitely another one that's pretty underrated, and who knows, I might review that pretty soon as well. But anyway, Tango and Cash is what I call one of the last great action films in terms of one of the last great 80s action films. Not one of the last great action films, period. One of the last great action films of the 1980s. This film perfectly encapsulates everything that I love about 80s action movies and then some. It's got two action heroes in their prime teaming up, kicking some ass, and taking some names. It also doesn't take itself too seriously, which is a big boon to it. It's a really good thing that it doesn't take itself too seriously. That adds to the fun. That's one of the reasons why it's just so entertaining. It's because it doesn't take itself seriously. You can call it goofy, you can call it corny, you can call it over the top. And yeah, that's really what it is. That's kind of what it's trying to do anyway. It is over the top, and I love that about it. I love over the top action. I love over the top 80s action, and Tango and Cash is a prime example of this. The production was beset with problems from the beginning. First, Patrick Swayze, who was originally cast as Cash instead of Kurt Russell, which would have been interesting to see Stallone work with Patrick Swayze. I love Patrick Swayze. It would have been nice to see what kind of chemistry Stallone would have had with Patrick. but I'm definitely glad that he dropped out and went on to star in Roadhouse instead, leaving the door open for Kurt Russell, because I can't imagine Tango and Cash as anything other than it is. I can't imagine Sylvester Stallone teaming up with Patrick Swayze. It just doesn't have the same ring to it. Stallone and Russell, great, match made in heaven. And I thought Stallone and Russell's chemistry in this film was just brilliant. So anyway, principal photography for Tango and Cash began without a completed script. Sylvester Stallone had the original director of photography, Barry Sonnenfeld, fired. Yeah, Barry Sonnenfeld, the same guy who would go on to direct The Addams Family and Men in Black, was originally the original director of photography for Tango and Cash. Stallone instead replaced him with Donald D. Thorin, who had shot Lockup. And then, after nearly 3 months of filming, the original director, Andrei Konchalovsky, which is the director, his name is on this film, but he didn't direct most of it. He was fired by producer John Peters in a dispute over the movie's ending, and he was replaced by Albert Mangoli, who filmed all the chase and fight scenes. And I gotta say, nice job, Albert. And then he also shot the ending. So he reshot the ending and all the chase and fight scenes and everything, which I really love those scenes. I think they're really cool. And if you do, there is I didn't really notice that it was directed by two different directors. Or three different directors, because apparently, reportedly, executive producer Peter MacDonald, who was also one of the film's second unit directors, took over directing the movie before Mangoli was brought in. And a year earlier, MacDonald had to step in as a director on Rambo 3, after the original director was fired by Stallone. The original director was Russell Mulcahy, the director of Highlander. And then apparently in his 1999 book of memoirs, Elevating Deception, Konchalovsky said the reason he was fired was because he and Stallone wanted to give the film a more serious tone, more serious Stallone, and make it more realistic than the producers wanted, especially John Peters, who kept pushing the film to be goofier and campier, and as such his relationship with Peters became unsustainable and untenable. And I gotta be honest, I think Peters is right. I cannot imagine Tango and Cash being a super serious film. I can't imagine it being a serious action movie. I just can't see that. I think the way that Peters wanted it is actually the ideal version of Tango and Cash. So I think this actually worked out for the better. Is it really too bad that Konchalovsky was fired? Yeah. Or was it? But I gotta be honest, I think Stallone and Konchalovsky were wrong with their vision for this film to begin with. I mean, you're gonna have a buddy cop movie, and we're gonna try to take it seriously. I mean, yes, Lethal Weapon has a serious tone, and it's not realistic, and it's not super serious. It still has its moments of levity, and that's why between the two leads, and that's what makes those films so entertaining and so great. It's another reason why Tango and Cash is so great, and I actually like it more than the Lethal Weapon movies. Nothing against the Lethal Weapon movies. I love those films. They're great, but I'm a huge fan of Stallone, and I'm a huge fan of Kurt Russell, and this is really a blast to see them work off each other and work together in this film. Nothing against Mel Gibson and Danny Glover, because they're great with one another as well. I mean, but Tango and Cash is it just has everything that I love about this type of movie. And another reason why Konchalovsky was fired, apparently, was his refusal to agree with what he referred to as the increasingly insane demands that producer Peters had. Konchalovsky said that he was initially hired to make a buddy cop movie with plenty of humor, but Peters wanted to turn it into spoof without any semblance of seriousness. Now, if this is true, well, I don't really know the truth of what's going on. I don't really know which story is true and which one isn't. But if this is true, then maybe Konchalovsky's vision was fine, was sincere. If that was what they wanted to do, which is something like Lethal Weapon, they wanted it to be a buddy cop movie with plenty of humor, but didn't want it to be a spoof without any semblance of seriousness, then okay, that might be good too, but it would be different. It wouldn't be as madcap. It wouldn't be as zany. It wouldn't be as over the top and just insanely entertaining as Tango and Cash is. So it might have been a different version, but it might not have been as good, but it still might have been good. It would have been interesting. But I'm just glad things turned out the way they did. And it's honestly shocking when you look at all of these production problems that Tango and Cash ended up as a great film, as much of a great film as it is, because it's just a mess. Considering all these different directors were fired, new directors hired, and then fired again, and then another directors put in, and so yeah, but Konchalovsky, he refused. He didn't want to deal with Peters's zany madcap vision of Tango and Cash. Konchalovsky argued that they were simply trying to make two different movies, and when Peters realized his inability to bend Konchalovsky to do his will, he fired him. And according to supporting actor Brion James, the late great Brion James, who played Ray Queen in this film, the film was in disarray from the very beginning, and by the halfway point of the shoot, when the film was several months behind schedule, Peters and Konchalovsky were no longer speaking. James agreed that the official reason Konchalovsky was fired was because of the budget, and then he was also said that going over budget was not Konchalovsky's fault, and that Konchalovsky did not deserve to be fired. And Konchalovsky, however, had nothing but praise for Sylvester Stallone, and both he and James said that despite Stallone's ego and decision to fire the original cinematographer, and the fact that he had a hand in Konchalovsky's firing, Stallone was the one person who held the project together, and he was a constant voice of reason on an increasingly chaotic set, which is kind of ironic for a pretty chaotic film to have a chaotic shoot. And also, according to Konchalovsky, by the end of principal photography, Stallone was unofficially working as producer, director, and writer as well as star, and Konchalovsky believes that had it not been for Stallone, Peters would have fired him much sooner than he did. Production sources said that Konchalovsky had been given impossible scheduling demands, and then was made the scapegoat when he fell behind. So I just thought I had to mention that, and of course this is from Wikipedia, so we don't necessarily know apparently how much of this is true and how much of it isn't. But I mean, some of it's coming from Konchalovsky himself, and others is coming from the co-stars, as in Brion James. So I think there's a lot of truth to a lot of this. And apparently this film went into production in June. Directors were changed in late August, and after principal photography was finished in September, Mangoli was called back in, and they shot 2 more weeks of reshoots, including filming a completely new opening sequence. And apparently the filming was finally finished on October 20th, 1989, 8 weeks before its scheduled theatrical opening. The movie was racing to its December 15th release, but due to Warner Brothers studio complaints on every cut that was edited before they approved the final theatrical version, it barely made the deadline and ended up being shipped in theaters in wet prints, meaning that it was barely completed before its release date. And because Warner Brothers didn't want to risk the same problems with the Motion Picture Association of America, aka the Motion Picture Association of Assholes, as it had with its previous film Cobra that they did with Stallone, which is really a shame. Fuck the MPA. It ordered the editors to cut some death scenes in the last part of the movie while it was being re-edited, this explains the usage of jump cuts every time someone is shot in the film. So, yeah. And speaking of Lethal Weapon, apparently Jeffrey Boehm, who worked on the scripts for the Lethal Weapon films, did a rewrite of the script, but he described this experience as being long, incredible, and awful, and it didn't change anything in the film. And even though he did a lot of rewrites, he hated the script, and so he did not want to be credited. And so, yeah, it was just so crazy. I mean, according to one of the more experienced crew members in an interview, they said that it was the worst organized, most poorly prepared film I've ever been on in my life. From the first day we started, no one knew what the hell anyone was doing. And the same crew member also mentioned some reasons why director Konchalovsky was fired. He found himself in over his head. There were scenes scheduled for 3 days that were so complicated that should have been scheduled for 6 or 7 days. And they were trying to do a 22-week movie in 11 weeks. I honestly feel bad for Andrei if there's truth to this. They basically just put him in front of a firing line. They gave him no chance. No chance in hell. And ultimately, the film missed its budget by over $20 million and had to be completely re-edited by editor Stuart Baird, prior to its theatrical release. And according to even though this film had all of this craziness, this chaotic backstory, chaotic production, the film turned out really good. At least I thought so anyway. It was a really fun movie. I love this film. I really do. I think it's one of my favorite films of all time. One of my favorite, probably my pick for my favorite buddy cop movie. And I just wanted to really just kind of give you some of those juicy behind the scenes stuff, and then kind of just talk about some of the scenes in the film that I really liked. First off, here we have the director. It's Andrei Konchalovsky. I don't know how much of the film he directed, however much of it that he did. Nice job. Albert Mangoli, nice job. I don't know how much Peter McDonald did. I hope it wasn't much because I heard he's an asshole. It's written by Randy Fettleman and probably a bunch of other uncredited writers who didn't want their name on the film. It stars Sylvester Stallone as Lieutenant Raymond Tango, who's just more. I like this. I really enjoyed this performance by Stallone. It was kind of this uptight Beverly Hills policeman. This cop, Beverly Hills cop, who he's into stockbroking, and he wears a suit, he wears glasses, he's a slick guy, but he just loves being a cop because he loves the action. And then you have the complete opposite, this down home, down and dirty, everyman, Gabriel Cash, played by Kurt Russell. And they are kind of rivals in L.A. And you also have Teri Hatcher, who plays Stallone's sister, Catherine Kiki Tango. This is one of the first roles I honestly remember ever seeing her in, other than Lois and Clark. Jack Palance as the main heavy, the guy behind all of the shenanigans and all of this, the whole dastardly plan to put Tango and Cash behind bars. Uh, Love it. I just love Jack Palance in this. It's just a lot of fun. If you loved his performance in Batman, which of course came out the same year as this, you'll definitely enjoy his performance in Tango and Cash. He just smolders in every scene that he's in. You have Brion James as Requiem. Really fun performance. Really enjoy. It's very intimidating. I miss Brion James. I really do miss Brion James. He's a very intimidating presence. Sounded like he was a really nice guy, and according to him, the film was a huge hit in Russia. Was pirated a bunch of times, and he didn't really know it. No, he didn't know this. He had no idea, and he went in to shoot a film, and he went to Russia, and he was mobbed by fans. So apparently, Tango and Cash is really big in Russia, and Tango and Cash didn't really do that well in the box office. It was made for a budget of about $55 million. It only made 63, so it made a little bit of a profit, but apparently it was a huge hit on home video, just like Cobra was, so it ended up making some of its profit. It ended up making a considerable profit in the end. It just seemed like it was a bad release date, December 22nd. I don't know what they were thinking. Buddy cop action movie should have been in August. December was just not really the best release date for this film. Also, this 1989 was a loaded year in terms of blockbuster movies, so it would have been hard for the film to really do spectacular anyway, but I still think it deserved better. I really do. You got Kurt Russell and Stallone in a movie together, and it doesn't do well enough to get a sequel, which is really too bad, which I really would have looked for. I would have loved to have seen. But considering all of the behind-the-scenes problems, even if this movie was a giant hit, it probably wouldn't have gotten a sequel anyway. So as a one-off, it's a fantastic one-off. It's a really, really good one-off. You also have other supporting roles. You have Geoffrey Lewis as Captain Schroeder. He was uncredited here. I don't know why. I really liked his performance in this, so it was kind of crazy that he was uncredited here. Michael J. Pollard, who's been in a bunch of other movies, he had a bit role here as Owen, who's this kind of Q-like character, James Bond, the Q, the guy who comes up with all the gadgets for Bond. He's pretty much a rip-off of Q. You also have James Hong, Lopan himself, and another film of Kurt Russell as Quan, one of the henchmen of Brett, played by Jack Palance. You also have Robert Z'Dar, the late great Robert Z'Dar, as the Jaw. It doesn't have a name; it's just the Jaw. Who Stallone confuses as Conan the Barbarian in a fun scene. He was all like, "I loved you in Conan the Barbarian." It's like, if you need me, me and my ass will be in the neighborhood. But And that's another thing I just love about this movie. Just this movie is loaded to the brim with fun one-liners. Just one one-liner after the next. It's just got so many fun, witty one-liners. If you love one-liners, you're gonna get a kick out of Tango and Cash. If you haven't seen Tango and Cash, I highly recommend it. I really do. And there's a bunch of other really well-known supporting character actors in this. Other than Robert Z'Dar, you got Brocksmith, who you've seen in films like Total Recall and so on. You got Michael Jeter, who you've seen in films like Air Bud and many others. You got Clint Howard, who plays this character named Slinky, who is Tango's cellmate. So yeah, great cast. Could not ask for a better cast. Two great leads in Stallone and Kurt Russell, and a pretty cool plot. I like the idea of having these two super cops get framed by this shady underworld leader guy who's these two super cops have been like his worst enemy, and they've cost him millions of dollars in drug sales and gun sales. And so instead of killing them outright and making them martyrs, he decides he's going to fuck with them and he's going to put them away in prison. And they get sent to general population where you have all these prisoners that they put away uh, who they're going to have to deal with. And you have a fun fight scene with Kurt Russell and Stallone fighting prisoners. And then a really cool way that they escape with the whole, doing on the zip line on these power lines. And, there are some things about the film that I gotta be honest, I could do without, like Kurt Russell and drag. That's a sight that I don't want to see. That's a sight that gives me sore eyes. But it's something that it doesn't affect my enjoyment of the film that much because it's barely even in the movie. Uh, but and then it's just such a fast-paced film. I mean, you start out, you introduce you to these two characters. You got a fun scene with Stallone's Tango in a scene that's straight from Police Story or one of his Jackie Chan films, where he's shooting the gun at the semi and then makes the semi stop right in front of him, and then the thugs spill out the front window onto the ground below, and then he pulls out, he pulls out his handcuffs, and he's all like, you like jewelry? You know, I love Stallone's performance in this. He's just having a blast. He's having a lot of fun, and it shows. And his one-liners are definitely on point here. And I love the scene where after he gets the jaw and his cohort to smash through the window of the semi. He goes in and decides to do what he was going to do anyway. He went up here to do a drug bust, and he's out of his jurisdiction, so he's not really supposed to be doing this, but he's a super cop, so he thinks fuck it. And I love this scene because you have this whole line where this one guy, Stallone shoots. They're like, we searched this truck. There's nothing here. What are you talking about? There's no cocaine in this. There's no cocaine here. And then Stallone just shoots the tanker, and then all this cocaine starts spilling out. And he's like, and then before they were like, who does this guy think he is? He's like, Rambo. And then I love Stallone's line here. He's like, Rambo is a pussy. And he shoots the gun, and then and then the cocaine starts spilling out of the tanker. And he's just like, what do you know? It's snowing. I just love that. I love that line. I love that scene. And I also love the guy who's just this extra. And this is something that normally I wouldn't like because it's an example of chewing the scenery and being over the top and just bad acting. But it's endearing to me where this deputy guy comes up and gets in Stallone's grill and he's all like, who the hell do you think you are? I want your gun, I want your badge, and I want your ass. It's like, who the hell do you think you are? I just love that guy. If you know exactly what I'm talking about, if you've seen this movie. But anyway, so yeah, great way to introduce Tango. And then you have Cash, he gets introduced, and he's just driving home, and this Asian guy comes in and smashes through his mirror while after he's checking himself out and giving a smirk to the camera, and then starts shooting at him. And then because it's a chase where Cash is chasing after this guy, and you get a fun little car chase in a parking garage, and he catches up with him. And then I like how all this stuff actually ties in. Like, the Jaw, Robert Zadar, actually shows up later in the film. He's a part of the whole deal. He's, with Tango and Cash getting sent to prison. Same thing with Requin. Everything gets kind of set up beforehand. It's not kind of going backwards and telling you, oh, doesn't really spend that a lot of time being like, oh, these are the people who did this. They already tell you right from the beginning. There's no mystery here. And, mystery has its place, but a film like this, it just kind of hurts the pacing. So, this just helps the movie continue to just move along at a rapid fire pace. And then, it isn't long before Tango and Cash end up getting some information from some informants about some deal that's going down. They go in and try to get a bust, and they get busted. And they get framed for murder. And I love the way that these trial scenes are edited with like interspersed like newspaper footage, like newspapers that like fly at the screen, and it's just, and there's a nice little uses of slow motion. And the courtroom scene is great too. I mean, there's just so many great scenes in this movie, so many great quotable moments and lines of dialogue. I love the scene where after Stallone, Tango has this very eloquent speech talking about how much he appreciates the department and hopes that the results of this trial doesn't hurt the department anyway. And Tango, he thinks he's just said the piece. That's all. And here comes Kurt Russell. Cash is all like he's ready to say his piece, and Tango's like, no, just don't. No, you don't need to do that. And he's like, I wish I could say things as eloquently as Mr. Tango here did, but I can't. Because, this whole thing fucking sucks! I love that. And that ties into you can relate that to things in everyday life. You can relate that to, I'm sorry, I can't say that for some reason today. You can relate that to any kind of bad news you get, whether it's movie news or sports or whatever. You could just be like, this whole thing fucking sucks. This is the biggest pile of bullshit. It's great. I love that scene. Telling it like it is. And then they get sent to prison. There's some fun with Stallone fucking with Clint Howard. Kurt Russell has a cellmate who's like this big black guy who's like 10 times bigger than he is. I love the scene where he's like, that crapper is mine. And Cash is like, well, where am I gonna go? And then he's like, well, you ain't gonna go there. And the Cash is like, yeah, really? And he goes up and tries to, get in his face, and he realizes he's this big hulk of a guy. And then Cash is like, that crapper is yours. There's just a lot of fun scenes in this movie. So eventually they break out of prison in a fun way. Then they have 24 hours to find the guys who framed them. And yeah, and that's pretty much what happens. It's just a fast-paced movie where they go in and they go to this. They get weaponry together. They get this RV from hell, which is this really cool SUV with like miniguns on the side, and it's just a really cool looking car. They borrow it from Michael J. Pollard's character, and they head over to this airfield. And of course, even before that, though, there's this really fun scene where they go and interrogate Brion James. And I love this scene because it just encapsulates how much fun this film is and how well Stallone and Russell work off each other. They're just perfect with each other in this movie. They just really, really great chemistry. And even before that, you had stuff where they were in the prison, and I love this scene where Cash is just freaked out because the Red Queen has got a knife to his throat, and he just gets pissed, and he's like, you want to cut my throat? Go ahead. You want to cut my fucking head off and use it for a fucking basketball? You can bowl it with the motherfucker for all I care. Just don't let him do it. I don't want to be killed by this limey immigrant jerk off. I want to get killed by an American jerk off. And even while they're just watching the trial, I mean, you have great quotes. When this is over, we have to pay Jabba the Hutt here a visit. I'll bring the chainsaw. I'll bring the beer. I mean, I love it. And then here you get to the scene where, Stallone is just fucking with the guy. They're interrogating Red Queen. And he takes a grenade and tapes it to his mouth because they tried, holding him over a building and that didn't work. And so Cash is like, "You're getting a little radical here, don't you think?" And Tango's like, "What's radical? Blowing a man's head off with a fucking hand grenade is a touch much, don't you think? You got your way, and I got mine. I'm kind of glad you didn't want to talk, Red Queen. You know what? I'll just shoot him in the goddamn leg. He'll talk. I don't want the leg. I want the whole package. Maybe he doesn't know anything, okay? I don't really care." And then he continues. And I love this whole scene. And I'm trying to find it. And I'm sorry if I'm like going in and just going off kilter here and just being all over the place. But I just don't want to forget some of these quotes. They're so awesome. They're so great. Seems like they're not showing that one. But anyway, the one that I remember, he he continues to fuck with the guy. Stallone's fucking with the guy, and Stallone's like getting into Kurt Russell's face. He's like, "If you don't want to get sticky, then get back, Jack." Dun 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 dun. And of course, and then Cash and Kurt Russell's acting here is great. He's like, "Oh man, I heard about this guy. I heard about the guys. You're fucking Section 8. This guy's crazy." And then of course, Stallone's in the whole thing where he's ready to pull the pin on the grenade, and Requin's like, "No, no, 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 shut up, no, no, no." And then he pulls it, and then it's like, "What?" And before he pulls the pin, he rips the tape off, and then Requin gives them where the airfield is, where they can go in, and who set them up, and where they can go in and get some revenge and kick some ass. And then Stallone, of course, pulls the pin and is all like, "My contribution to birth control." And then it's just a dud. But I love that whole thing. It's like, "You fell for the oldest trick in the book. Bad cop, worst cop." And then you have the whole thing where he goes for a high five, and Tango's like, "No." He's like, "Did you bump uglies with my sister? Oh, come on, man. I didn't do it." I love it. And even in the prison, of course, going back to prison, you have this film introduces like foobar. And if you've heard me use that before in reviews, it's because of this movie. And foobar, and even Stallone's like, "What's foobar?" It's like, fucked up beyond all recognition. So they get to the airfield, they get in the RV from hell, kick some ass. There's all these explosions and monster trucks and bulldozers. It's just testosterone. It's like a testosterone fueled wet dream, and everything is just awesome. And then they finally, get into the facility, and there's a nice fight with Kurt and Brion James. Stallone kicks this other guy's ass, and I don't know if it's the same actor who played who was a stunt double for Michael Keaton, the fight double for Michael Keaton in Batman. I mean, very similar. I don't know if it's Dave Lee, but I don't think it is though. I think it's some other guy. But anyway, whoever it is definitely a really talented martial artist. It is Dave Lee. who plays Sonny. I knew I recognized him. So the same guy who is the fight double for Batman in Batman '89 is the Sonny, the guy who fights Stallone in the end of the movie. And Kurt Russell blows up Brion James with a grenade, puts it in his pants. This time it's not a dud. And it is like, FUBAR, big time. And then they go in, and apparently uh, Kiki has been kidnapped by Perrette, and they have this whole sort of hall of mirrors thing, and they have to think real quick. Uh, and shoot the right mirror because he's got a gun to her head, and they don't have any time because he already pressed the self-destruct button, so this whole facility is going to blow up in like a matter in like 20 seconds or whatever, or like a minute or so. And I love the whole thing where they're like, aim, aim low, aim for the leg, because we're going to take him alive, and they shoot him in the head. They're like, I think our sight's a bit off. And then they run and get away out of the facility just in time before it explodes. And then Kurt Russell is trying to get Stallone to give him permission to date his sister. If I said daughter earlier, I'm completely wrong. It's sister. And it's the whole thing where eventually, they kind of agree, and then they high five. Kurt smiles like the brightest, just awesome, just most. It's such a contagious smile. So this bright smile, and then they give each other a high five. Pan out. The newspaper shows up. The Tango Cash have been acquitted, and they're back, and they've stopped, they saved, they didn't really save the world or anything, but, they're back, the super cops are back, and then you have the song at the end credits, it's pretty good, by Bad English, I believe, and it's called, The Best of What You Got. So, you get the best of what I got. Anyway, yeah, that's Tango Cash. Awesome movie, action classic, love it to death. Great cast. Could not ask for a better cast. I know I'm repeating myself. I apologize, but I just want to make sure I covered all the bases here. The direction by multiple directors is good. It's slick. It's stylish. It's got this really great aesthetic that I really like. It's fast-paced. It's really entertaining. It doesn't take itself too seriously, which is a feather in its cap. It's got a really great score by Harold Faltermeyer, probably one of the best last truly great scores that he did. It's very catchy. It fits the personalities of Tango and Cash to a T. And yeah, you got great action sequences, great characters, a plot that isn't too complex, but it doesn't need to be because it's about Tango and Cash. It's about Stallone and Kurt Russell kicking some ass, and you get that and then some. You get some gunplay, you get some explosions, you get some car chases, you get one-liners, you get a bundle of fun, and you get some laughs as well. It's just a really, really fun movie, and a classic. So I don't know what else to say about Tango and Cash, except it was rated out of 5 stars. I would give the movie 5 stars, really. I don't have any problems with it. Even the little tiny things that might bug me, like Kurt Russell and drag, it's not enough to affect the rating of the film. I love this movie. Anyway, thank you for watching, and as always, I will see you guys later. See ya.